You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We have Dutch Martin is with us. He is with Project 21, which is with the National Center. They're working on something very interesting to me, of course. And Dutch, welcome to the program. You're speaking with Brett and John Rappaport on the Final Say, so thank you for joining us, first of all.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And, you know, this is interesting, and I'll tell you why. Well, there are two angles here. One is the reason I have followed Project 21 for many years now, and I really appreciate the work that all of you are doing for the fact that, well, yes, you're black conservatives, but I believe that you are probably one of the most attacked people in this country because you have a different viewpoint from, you know, a lot of people who are, you know, that, you know, would ordinarily, I suppose, be more liberal. And you guys really come under fire. And so you continue to do, you know, terrific work, and you stand by your beliefs. But this is a particular case. We have in this country a president who you would think would be doing the best he can to help change things in a lot of the neighborhoods, which, you know, he kind of ran on, didn't he? And so, but we see under this one issue of immigration that you guys are all pointing out that the executive action that he's looking for is going to help illegal aliens, which largely come from Latin American countries, and will be directly harming, you know, African Americans. But also what you've pointed out in the work that you've done here is that it's going to decrease the amount of immigration from African countries. And I find that extremely interesting. And it brings a lot of questions to discuss, and that would be, you know, what is the policy in the United States and who determines where we decide people are going to come from? And, you know, why is it only an administration that's making those types of decisions?
Well, as a former Foreign Service officer, I can tell you that the U.S. Department of State has assigned certain legal immigration quotas for all countries where their foreign nationals want to come and immigrate to the United States legally. And everyone has, there's a maximum number of applicants from said country per year that are allowed in, assuming they go through the whole background investigation, you know, complete the application, so on and so forth. This is going to hurt African immigrants because African immigrants who immigrate and naturalize here in the United States are very, very productive citizens. I know this from personal experience and observation because the vast majority of the African immigrants that I know, that I have as friends and that I work with, number one, they immigrated to this country legally. They played by the rules, okay? They obeyed our laws, they respected our procedures, and they showed that they have skills, knowledge, and abilities that would make them not only productive members of American society, i.e. they wouldn't basically suck off the breast of the welfare state once they got here, but that they would contribute positively and productively to the short and long-term economic well-being of American society. They proved that beyond a reasonable doubt, which is why they were able to legally immigrate to the United States as naturalized citizens. Okay, President Obama's plan to grant amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants from Latin America is basically going to spit in the face of every African and other foreign national who immigrated to this country legally, including my own wife. My wife is from Morocco. She immigrated to this country legally from Morocco, played by the rules, followed the law, etc. So President Obama's plan to allow amnesty for illegal aliens, many of whom carrying diseases, drugs, criminal activity, and every vice you can think of, is basically spitting in the face of the effort that my wife put forth, and not to mention her patience and determination of becoming a naturalized American citizen.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, in my travels to just Washington, D.C. and New York City and I guess even Philadelphia or some of the other major cities, I've come across so many different individuals, whether they're from Kenya or Nigeria or, wherever. And it seems to me that not only are they hardworking, they tend to have better educations than you'd get in the United States. And they're very kind, engaging, very interesting. I mean, sometimes you find yourself even you get in a cab with somebody who was probably a doctor or an engineer in their country, and they're driving a cab here because that was all they could do, and they're probably smarter than most of the doctors currently in our country.
Absolutely, and not only that, but you can bet your bottom dollar that their children are academic wonderkins. Okay, the children of African immigrants and Afro-Caribbean immigrants, and we already know about the children of Asian immigrants. They come to this country and they are raised to academically excel, and there is no other option, and they academically excel. I mean, when I was a student at Boston University, which is where I graduated, on Friday nights and Saturday afternoons and Saturday evenings, it was not uncommon for me to be one of the very few native-born Black American college students in the library, where the majority of students hitting the books that night were white, Asian, and African students, whereas everybody else was out of the clubs, out of parties, and so on and so forth. We were the only ones hitting the books because we cared about getting an education. So let's add that little element into it. Whereas, these children of illegal immigrants coming from Latin American countries, many of them do not speak English. They are flooding local school systems here in the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan area, particularly in southern Maryland. They're having a ginormous influx of illegal alien students, and they don't know what to do with them.
Dutch, this is John. I am very frustrated with this entire black-white equation, and I want to add something into this. Part of my feeling is that, and you can't just blame the politicians, so you have to blame the black folks themselves in this country, but we have had basically a 50-plus year game of voter fraud where the black community has been literally decimated for the sake of creating a permanent voter block. And we see it time and time again that, the folks that would appear to be their patronage, saints, are actually the ones who are creating a permanent indentured servitude for the sake of buying votes. Now, let's assume, and obviously I want you to comment on that, but let's assume we mutually accept that premise. What bothers me so much about this whole border fiasco is it's a double-down nightmare for our struggling black brothers and sisters in this country, because basically they're already struggling to achieve reasonable employment rates, and many are willfully or otherwise are on social services, and so now we're bringing in all these people illegally who are going to take those jobs. So now we basically have taken those job opportunities away so these people can actually start taking the basic steps up the ladder and make progress, and almost forcing them to have to stay on those roles that we would so love to see them come off of. So I wanted you to sort of comment on and maybe how that correlates to the difference between Republican and Democratic political philosophies.
Well, in the late 1960s, when Lyndon Baines Johnson created the War on Poverty programs, which basically exploded the welfare state and turned it from a temporary assistance program for widows and children to an economic bureaucracy that paid unmarried black women disproportionately to have children out of wedlock and to spend their entire lives on the dole and perpetuate generational poverty. He said in private, and I quote, "I'll have those niggers voting Democrat for the next 200 years. And by God, he's done a pretty good job of doing just that. It's been 50 years, and despite the fact that in most democratically run cities where poverty is off the charts and the permanent underclass consists primarily of African Americans, yet over 90% of the black vote every election cycle goes to Democrats. And so that's one thing. And secondly, when you have black conservatives like myself who have been attacked, forget by, strangers or political opponents, who have been attacked by members of their own family for having the audacity to A, vote Republican, B, have a conservative mindset, and C, refuse to drink Barack Obama Kool-Aid, then you have this political zeitgeist in the black community that basically prevents them from seeing the forest for the trees. When 50% of the Hispanic voters, so 41% of the Hispanic voters so votes Democrat versus Republican, that's a pretty diverse voting bloc. When 90 to 93% of the black vote constantly goes to Democrats in the election cycle, that's not a voting bloc. That's a bunch of lab rats chasing after cheese. And the cheese that they're getting is in the form of free goodies like free stuff, welfare benefits, social services, and anything and everything that they can get from the government without working or without producing. It is absolutely reprehensible. It flies in the face of everything that Booker T. Washington and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Lived and died for.
Now, isn't this exactly the reason why you see such a delta in productivity between, let's say, maybe conservative and liberal blacks in this country, but more importantly, from an immigration perspective, people, and not just people coming in from Africa, but as you pointed out, Asia and across the world, most of the people who come here legally, especially people coming from underdeveloped or developing nations, they don't have the luxury of playing the blame game while waiting in line for government services. They understand how hard and cruel life is when you're not prepared for that, and so they have taken those skills that they've honed to survive the luxury of living in this country, and they turn it into the goal that made this country successful. So, to me, that is something that we need to yell from the mountaintops and showcase as the right way to do it, as opposed to what we just sadly saw in the last couple of weeks, is taking a tragedy in a relatively under the radar American city and turning it into a pre-election campaign divisive issue for, again, the net purpose of gaining new votes.
I couldn't agree more. Like I said, I have to harken back to my time, my college days in Boston, where the children of Afro-Caribbean and African and Asian immigrants, basically exhibited the hard work and dedication and academic conscientiousness that their parents taught them, and in many cases, I knew that some of my college mates, I had the pleasure of meeting their families and their parents. For example, one young lady, her parents immigrated from Haiti to Boston. Father came to this country with nothing, absolutely nothing but a shirt, the clothes on his back. Within a generation, not only did he become a successful tradesman, electrician, but he became the pastor of his own church. And all three of his children are college graduates and are successful. And, but again, when you point out how immigrants of color, African, Asian, etc., come to this country with nothing, and despite having nothing, without charity and without demanding charity, still succeed and achieve the American dream, you're going to have the Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharptons play the black victim card and accuse you of racism, or in my case, accuse me of being an Uncle Tom, the sellout, and so on and so forth. And then, always want to portray black Americans as inherent victims of the white man that can't get ahead without their help. Like I said, I've gotten to the point where I would rather ram my head up against a brick wall, because at least that feels better than trying to rationalize and have an intelligent debate with liberals.
Amen. Hey, before I hand you back to Brett for a couple of final questions, and this may be a conversation we can have off air, but just so you know, Brett and I are actually in the middle of right now working on a couple of potential contracts that entail working with various developing African nations and helping to provide certain social infrastructure and tools to disseminate education, because it is the one thing that I've been just so excited by, is to have some very, very high-level influential people in the political and the faith and the philanthropic areas saying that we understand that one simple thing. They say basically there's three components we need to be successful. We already have family structure, we have self-respect, and the key thing we're missing is education. And with those three things, you could survive basically anywhere on this planet where you have a reasonable culture, obviously lacking the kind of chaos we see in some countries.
I think that's a great idea. I say if that's where your passion lies, I think there's a lot of good that can be done with that, I say go for it.
Dutch, I wanted to bring up something, and I think we have to look at it with all these issues, but I think sometimes there's too much politics with regards to whether it be immigration or any other issue, and we see it more so than anything in the what happened in Ferguson. And I just want to remind ourselves that the only way for any groups to work together to resolve issues are to work together and stop being divisive, stop playing the politics of it. And, you know, my idea might not be the best one, your idea might not be the best, or the other guy's might not be the best. But if we actually sit down and share our ideas and have an open, honest debate and discussion, instead of always being on the offensive with one another, then perhaps maybe we'll start to make little, start setting the building blocks, if you will, towards either repairing or building positive change. And I also have to say, I'm appalled by, I guess, the lack of judicial process in some of the things that have happened recently. Because I believe, I'm not saying who's right and wrong in any of these cases, regardless of what it is around the country, but I do believe that everything should be thoroughly investigated, and if a particular town is a corrupt area, then and it has to be an outside investigative group, then that's fine. But I think we shouldn't rush to judgment on any of these issues and allow the facts to be determined and then shared, and then take it from there. Go ahead,
well,
Joseph.
you know what? You're preaching to the choir, as was the case with the Trayvon Martin situation. The situation at Ferguson with the death of Mike Brown is a prime example of two tragic occurrences being politicized and bastardized for political and, in some cases, financial gain. Booker T. Washington said it best, and I'm going to paraphrase when he said there is a class of colored people who basically make money off of keeping the wrongs, the grievances, and the complaints of the black underclass front and center in the public eye. They don't want black people to get over their grievances because they don't want to lose their jobs. He was basically talking about the Al Sharptons, the Jesse Jacksons, and the modern-day NAACP. These people basically profit off of racial division and racial strife. If blacks and whites and others truly put down their grievances and work together the way that you just said, and really came together as one race, i.e. the human race, for the benefit and the betterment of American society, that would put Jesse, Al, and company out of a job. They don't want that. Think about it.
Well, that's certainly true. But, you and I are here at the table, and so is John, and so we're inviting everybody else to come along for the ride so we could start fixing things and making the positive change that I think we're all hoping for. Dutch, do you have a Twitter handle or something that our listeners could follow you on?
Yes, you can follow me at DAMartin1906 on Twitter. DAMARTIN 1906 on Twitter.
Excellent. And of course, that's the nationalcenter.org, and you can click on Project 21 to check out all the different work that everyone's working on. Dutch, it's a pleasure speaking with you. We always appreciate having you folks on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, guys. Let's keep hope alive.
Absolutely. Take care. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
You too.